here to talk about cultural intelligence. We still don't have a model yet where you can feed in all the culture and figure out what's the best culture to create or how you can improvise your own. Assuming that we'll get there at some point, I want to kick off this conversation around cultural intelligence, primarily acknowledging that for the GCCs, we have so much of details, so many parameters in perspective with geographies, industries, culture of the company itself, and the diversity we have in terms of employees working at all levels. So we are hoping to touch upon the aspects of what cultural intelligence means to this group, hear from them, their points of view, their experiences, their thoughts. And we want to kind of start with just the definition level. I had the opportunity to meet my colleagues a few times. And we've discussed a little bit in terms of what it means to each of us, and we thought we'd bring the thought to the larger forum and share insights and also hopefully find opportunities to interact, if not here, with the larger group, at least in outside or in the forums, if we have the ability to engage over lunch or coffee hours. So I want to start this engagement at the definition level and hear from each of the panelists, to hear from you what, as at the definition level, cultural intelligence means to you.
Thanks for that. So, we've all in India especially been true to the fact that, we want to treat others the way we want to be treated ourselves. But when you start looking at the borderless global capability centers, that's a very risky aspect because now you're living in a culture of cultures, right? And within that, for me, cultural intelligence, to put it simply, is really the ability to navigate, understand, and create that impact, with diverse cultures and in very, very unknown environments, especially if you're dealing with cultures which are not just generational, within countries, they are regional, across countries, across continents, and therefore, in that borderless hybrid environment, how do you navigate it and really evolve the impact of organizations?
What do you think, Avinash?
I think what cultural intelligence to me is, I think several years ago, we started talking about emotional intelligence, and now we know how critical and important it is. And now we started talking about cultural intelligence. To me, cultural intelligence is not just, definitely to start with navigating to different cultures within the organization, but really harnessing the power of this diverse culture. Coexisting, but ability to harness the power and to get most out of it. I will talk about getting best out of the collective wisdom of team. I think is getting best out of the culture. We know that we live in a global village where people are diverse teams and people working on different locations. Within India itself, there are multiple subcultures. I'm sure you observe within your company. Location to location also, we have offices in the locations, and no matter how much I want to say we are exactly the same, we are not. That's a fact. Generation to generation, people are different. Now, how do we make most out of the diversity? There's no point in fighting it, but actually making most out of the diversity they bring in. At the same time, creating that environment wherein there is appreciation for and acceptance for this diversity in culture. I think how do we harness that? That probably is how we will define cultural, intelligence as to going forward. This is going to be something very critical for the success as borderless organizations, become more common.
There's so much of diversity with everything between the geographies, levels, industries, and then of course within the regions in India as well. Thank you so much for that talk. Maybe we should pick it up from you as we initially this forum.
Sure, Himanshu. So, when we talk about cultural intelligence or the term which is used as cultural quotient these days, from my perspective, it is the ability of be able to adapt and adopt different culturally diverse settings, when we talk about in the context of norms, behaviors, and values. So I limit it there for now, as we go through the rest of the panel discussion.
Okay. So again, I think maybe Kalvina's point, because India is a great example of cultural diversity. I think intelligence is not right when you don't stereotype something. Like say this culture or say any set of people, we try to stereotype that. But cultural intelligence is trying to differentiate the respect and then give some consideration for the diversity that we have, appreciate the diversity that. That is what I feel cultural intelligence is. And finally, with respect to GCC, we have moved from being a technology shop or a backend shop to more consumer facing. We see more roles getting as we evolve and mature as a big GCC country which runs many GCCs. I think that evolution has to be create more emphasis here because we directly work with different consumers of different cultures. So appreciating the differences and not stereotyping something is what I feel is cultural. Actually, it's very important for GCCs.
I personally spend a lot of time walking the office, and especially to translate the mindset of watercolor to an engaging coffee conversation. And this kind of really helps me to see the mirror and appreciate what's going on and how it eventually trickles to the elements of business. And what I want to do is, with that level of definition, really appreciate the breadth of thinking that you all offer. I want to pick certain pockets and hear from you your thoughts in terms of, let's say, also starting with you, thinking of customers in perspective. How do you navigate these cultural differences as your organization interacts with customers?
That's a great question, and I probably put it under two frames, right? Global capability centers, to a large extent, if the parent organization is not operating in your geography, versus maybe a global capability center where you have business in that geography, sort of creates different challenges. For us and a lot of organizations, we are working in international markets. So by default, the starting point is we are very, very far away from the customers, right? To a large extent, centers start with back office, middle offices, in a financial services. As we start servicing customers, we start applying the lens of how we see that particular segment in our own country to start with. Right? So if I'm in India, I'm in financial services. If I'm a back office for a bank, I will start applying the cultural intelligence of how I bank myself or how I see that evolving. But then if I'm servicing customers, let's say in France or in UK or in Europe or America, suddenly there is a big difference between understanding what is the core need of the customer on something as simple as a savings product or an investment product could be dramatically different. And what I'm starting to see is, as global capability centers, we were talking about moving from cost to value. So there is this huge change that we're trying to bring in the mindset, start looking at value, keep the customer first. But while doing it, the biggest thing that we're not focusing on very, very actively is how do you help everybody in the organization understand the customer from a cultural perspective. And that comes from not just the ability to, let's say, innovate or design products or really look at contributing a lot more to the front office of the businesses. It also comes to some very, very basic construct that we've had forever, which is servicing customers. Right? When you're servicing customers, the same customer challenge that exists with a French customer versus an American customer, the way you deal with that resolution could be dramatically different. But most of all our trainings, our awareness, our development are all packaged towards bringing everyone up to the same level with respect to their customers. And I'm just trying to simplify that example because that's a very common tenet of what we do. So for me at this point of time, with the distance at which the customer is, for the GCCs to really evolve into a core partner to drive products, bring in revenues, really create an impact on customer experience, that is where two things become important. One, how do you really understand subtle nuances of cultures? How do you embed this cultural intelligence into the layers of management by hiring, training, getting the right people with that mindset? More and more we're now starting to see that the real path is co-designing and co-constructing with customers. Right? Those days where organizations design and create in silos and take it out into the market are gone. We are a very rich ecosystem in India where, irrespective of the large customers in the institution you talk about, all of them have let's say offices here, significant business here. So how do you really work through the cultural differences and bring that impact here becomes very, very crucial. So for us to really get closer to the customer, especially as a GCC, the cultural intelligence in the way of customer coaching probably becomes a very, very important measure on how we build it, create leaders that drive it, and then subsequently how do you measure the impact. I don't think it's completely solved yet. There's a lot of challenges in trying to get there, especially because now you're servicing customers in all parts of the world.
I think that's phenomenal, because one of the things I experienced in ASCOM GCC event is there's this perception that there is a little bit of dilution or disconnect between the GCCs and the value creation. One other thing I realized is that the GCCs have grown 10x from 2015 to where we are today in terms of the absolute count of GCCs. The next level of improvement probably will come not from the number of GCCs, but from the value that we will generate in the GCCs. And in order to generate that value, is the cost of, as you mentioned, to bring the employees closer to the customer, either domestic or in a global capacity. And that's probably the best way to articulate growth as it relates to customers. So that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to move to Avinash with a different lens this time, as you move from the outside world of customers to inside the organization. So the question for you, Avinash, is what leadership practices have proven effective in your organization to drive cultural competence?
Oh, I think that's a great question. There are certain things which are to be driven from the top, and this is one of them. You can't expect the cultural sensitization or the cultural quotient to improve on its own. It has to be driven from the top, and I think it has to start at the top from a strategy level, not something as something. Oh, by the way, we need to think about it. It has to be very much part of your strategy. Today, GCCs have, we all talk about GCCs have moved on from just order takers to really being partners, and that's all great. But that makes this whole cultural integration, having this cultural intelligence even more important. Because we are not just someone telling us do this and we are delivering it. And now GCCs are now going ahead and having a proverbial seat at the table when it comes to part of the executives. So first, most of the critical thing is it has to be part of strategy and not something as an afterthought. There has to be formal sensitization. I'm sure every company does that. Unfortunately, we all started with sensitizing the folks in GCC, but how about the other way? I think that's, but the good news is that is picking up, So that, for both formally and informally, that has to happen. Then we have to provide more avenues for people to interact. One of the, I still call it an experiment, which really worked so far so good for us. When we get expats, most of the times it is at the senior level that we get expats who come here and work as leaders, which is great. But how about having practitioner level people? Maybe we all have, our people want to travel to the US and spend time there, but how about encouraging a few people from other parts of the world coming, staying, working with the team? They're not as leaders, but as part of the team. I think that has been so very effective. There's a two-way sensitization that we have seen happening. I know, of course, it comes at a cost, but that's something which I think is something important. Because that is when you start treating everyone as truly equal. This whole term, and most of us come from a consulting background, on-site, offshore, that word is like, we use that word for first 10 years of my career. That whole on-site, offshore thing is totally, we have to diminish that. And then we as leaders also have to, I think, set an example that we treat people the same. If you are in a call with someone in the US, like one of my directors in the US and one of my directors here, and even if my tone changes when I speak to a person in the US versus here, it gets registered. I think we have to just consciously make that attempt. So we should not only be doing the right thing, but also see as doing the right thing. I think that's so very important from a leadership standpoint to really make this happen.
That's brilliant because you kind of then promoting this travel and communication. And sometimes that in-person engagement is so critical to have an open and honest dialogue. Like, we met in person, we met over Zoom, and we were two different people, right? It was hard to put the name and the face together for the first time, whether we met on the electronic media a few times. So that's great. Thank you so much for that. So moving from customers' lens to the leader's lens, and then let's talk about how we conduct business. And Devesh, maybe you can help enlighten the world of operations. Like, how do you see challenges in your GCC by appreciating how the cultural differences enable operations?
Sure. So let's take a step back first. In terms of, so if I talk about my GCC or the GCC that I represent, we are a life sciences GCC. I think I have colleagues here from IQVIA, Roche and others. One of the aspects that we have from a life sciences perspective, and that's what I would want to articulate. Number one, when we talk about internal challenges, which probably is common to almost every GCC, no matter which industry that GCC is representing, which is number one, the cultural misalignment in terms of hierarchical values, the cultural misalignment in terms of understanding the decision-making processes that are involved across different cultures. You have certain cultures which are very hierarchical in nature, you have certain others which are very open from that perspective. Number two, when we continue to talk about internal challenges are, this entire new concept of cultural globalization. What I mean is what Avinash just said. GCCs have a seat on the table at a global level. We have people leaders who are not just managing teams within India or within Philippines. I represent India, Philippines, and Japan here. So they are managing teams outside of these three countries across different cultures. So that's the second challenge, in terms of building that level of cultural quotient within the organization to be able to do so. Very quickly, number two, to what Kaustav mentioned was around customer piece. People who are part of GCC and have not necessarily had that level of exposure of other cultures on how the customer behaviors, preferences, would vary. And lastly, the reason I mentioned about life science piece, was to connect with this aspect was around the regulatory aspect. So we are a highly regulated industry. So we work with FDA in the US, MHRA, in UK and so on. So the way the different regulatory agencies work, the way the different compliances and the policies operate in different cultures are different. So those are some of the challenges that I have seen in my career of GCC leadership.
That's fantastic, Devesh, because we kind of touched upon the multi-geography aspects. You also touched upon the hierarchy aspect. If I don't assume the seat at the table, then I will become an order taker. If I have an organization that fosters this culture of geography agnostic reporting that's based on a position or a skill, and you can have reverse reporting, which we have in Snowflake, where a lot of the groups outside of India report to the leadership in India, and that really drives a lot of positivity in our culture. And that's just brilliant because it's just like amazing shift from talking about customer to your leadership to your operations, and then maybe in apology to your point of view, if you take all these practices, whether it's working with customers, leadership development, running your operations, how do you use your cultural intelligence to innovate in all or some of these pockets?
Sure, Himanshu. I'll take two examples. The first one, which we follow in Transmedia and GCC, it is just cultural intelligence here is a byproduct, but we have a solution here like an experiential learning solution that allows anyone, any Transmedia employee to post their business product, and any volunteer can take up and solve the problems. But I'll tell how it is related to cultural intelligence and how it helps to bridge the gap through experiential learning. So one example I would like to take is one of the problems was to play a pre-sales role for Philippines market as a temporary role, a part-timer. One of the associate employees signed up and they are doing that role as part of this volunteer hobbies initiative for 3 months. Post that, if you look at that, the employee is now culturally empowered. The employee got a good idea of how sales happens in the Philippines, what is the culture there, how the people, consumer in the Philippines behave. That gave an experiential learning for the employee. So that's a byproduct. So any experiential learning initiative, if at all possible without impacting the business, that gives a great opportunity for the employees to learn and develop the cultural intelligence. So this is one innovation I want to create. The second one I'm going to ask everyone a question. I guess most of them are sleeping. I guess let us find out. So how many of you don't have credit cards at all here? Anyone doesn't have a credit card? Good to see one hand go up.
Yes,
Very nice. So even the analyst here doesn't have a credit card. I'll tell the reason why I asked this question. If you look at our culture, I'm again stereotyping a bit, but just to give an example of cultural intelligence. If you look at the people here in India, typically we were not very open to taking a credit card a few years back. Most of us will say, I've seen even many of our professional friends say, let me do a debit card, I don't need a credit card, I'll forget to pay the loan. The statement date will be confusing. So a lot of cultural challenges were there in adapting the credit card. And as you know, like our company is into the credit business. So if you need to get a credit or say a loan, you need to have a very good credit score. But culturally, India a few years back, okay, I hope there are no credit card sponsors here, a few years back was very reluctant to take credit cards. But things have changed a lot. Now a new set of people have come, next generation, multiple generations have come who are really more ready to take credit cards. So the adaptation, as you can see from internet and other sources, like it has gone up significantly. So what has happened now is a chicken and egg problem, a cultural problem where people are reluctant to take credit cards. If you apply cultural intelligence, you will see that you are able to get more people getting into credit cards, like taking credit cards, or want to own a credit card, or say take a loan or something. So it has become more, if you apply intelligence, it has changed or evolved a bit. So the chicken and egg problem is, you give a loan based on credit history, but in this case, you have a person who doesn't have a loan, but wants to take a loan. So the problem here, the solution here, applying cultural intelligence, a new product came out in the market. It is not new any longer, something called new to credit score. So with the new to credit score, which is not the same as your residual credit score, it is a new to credit score. Based on that, if a person doesn't have a loan, then you give an NTC or new to credit score and offer them a loan. So this is one example of cultural intelligence giving a solution, where a culture shifted over a period of time. Where like I say, people reluctant to take a card, eventually move to taking more loans and card, and we don't have a solution in place. The cultural intelligence was applied and NTC came into place. So this is one example I wanted to highlight, how cultural intelligence drives a lot of innovation.
So we enabled this from inside your company to a real life business use case, so thank you for that. Now, of course, we don't have as much time, but I do want to make sure that as we look at the challenges and opportunities associated with acquiring talent, retaining talent, working in the age of AI and LLMs, and then dealing with this perception of how am I driving value for the business. I want all of us to think about that and perhaps a little bit on what all the said around talent, all that said around the changing technology landscape in the world of AI, and the perception of value creation. What does the future hold for you, each of you? What do the next 5 years look like for you? Starting with Kaustubh in the same order, we'll go around.
Sure. So, talking with the context of culture, right?
Yes, of course.
There are 2 or 3 things that I see really happening in the next 3 to 5 years. With a lot of international leaders or leaders from India being or heading a lot of global organizations, I see a shift of a board priority from diversity focused on gender to going beyond to cultures as well. So diversity of cultures, I think in the next 2 to 3 years is going to become a board topic where the constitution of the board will focus not just on gender diversity but on cultural diversity as well. starting to look at the impact of AI on the workforce, especially the GCCs. We're starting to talk about what jobs could go away, what jobs could, pretty much transform. What's important though is, as we are creating, AI solutions in Gen AI and LLMs, the challenge is going to be how do you embed cultural intelligence into the solutions. And that's a very, very, I think a topic that's not completely explored yet. If you want to scale, we can create solutions for a particular culture or a region, but if you want to really make those global, how to embed that into those solutions becomes, the other key aspect of what you do. The third, when we are trying to bring in talent, so far the focus has been skills, aptitude, and attitude. There is always a very subtle cultural fitment that we leave for the HR teams to do as on board. I anticipate with the advent of global roles, running mandates from here, leaders, not just senior leaders, but middle managers having teams and reporting from other countries. I anticipate this skill set of cultural navigation CQ, as we call it, probably the top of the agenda as a key filter before we start looking at scale and so on. So this becomes, in my mind, a very, very critical differentiator and a must-have rather than good packages.
Nice to hear that. Thank you so much.
So I echo whatever Kaustubh said. I don't know if he stole my notes. Jokes apart. Just to extend these comments further, I think what's going to happen more and more is GCCs primarily started with technology. That was the focus, and now we are going much beyond technology, much beyond these guys are good at IT and everything. We're going beyond that. So that definitely is going to continue as a trend. And from a cultural standpoint, this is something that Clean Harbors we have, although on a much smaller scale, but we are definitely going to grow. Where we talk about global teams, like it's perfect, you said that teams report from other parts of the world reporting to here. We have those product teams, product owner is here and the teams are spread across. But what we are also trying to do is go beyond that and look at real operation roles. So for example, we have our logistics, staff. These are some are blue collar, some are white collar staff across the length and breadth of North America. And we started with a small team of 5 people, seasoned people. So those teams are reporting to you. So some of our supply chain logistics are actually driven not just from analytics and all the nice stuff that we do using technology, but operationally. They report into here. They call from an administration standpoint, work standpoint. But again, that's I think the beginning. I think that trend is going to go. But for that to happen, I must say, not only there has to be cultural intelligence, but also operational intelligence has to come. It has to come. Otherwise, you may still bring in cultural intelligence, but people also need to bring that operational intelligence. I think those are kind of few trends that I see that is going to continue in the future.
Thank you for that, Avinash. Perhaps take a minute from each of you, Divesh, and Balaji, in the interest of time.
Absolutely. Very quickly, I'll stick to the same narrative of internal and external. Internally, the trend that would help us harness cultural intelligence more is the more distributed workforce. As we go more and more, and this is a worldwide phenomenon, not just for a particular region. From an external perspective, it's more around harnessing the power of cultural intelligence coupled with data analytics and AI and technology to create personalized customer experiences. So those are the 2 ways I would articulate the trends.
Yeah, quickly on AI, I think we already have tools in place which can do answer neutralization or suppression of noise. So that's going to be a big player in culture, where it will help people adapt. Once you say technology as an enabler. The second one is I think again what Kaustubh mentioned, we are now more a global village, where we have people in India managing teams across the globe. So that's going to grow much more bigger. So that's one area to watch out in the future for applying cultural intelligence.
Thank you all for your thoughts. And I think it will sum up to say that the sponsors of GCCs really feel that we we've shifted the narrative for each of the GCCs from low value, low cost mindset of the GCCs to really a high value, mid cost mindset. And that confidence that will instill in the GCCs will demonstrate what the culture is drive for us. So really appreciate your time and participation, and thank you so much all of you.
Thank you.